What's up guys, it's Will back again, and today's review is Sausage Party. I can't believe that this movie's trailer somehow got shown before a Finding Dory movie at some theater in California, because let me tell you guys, this movie is R-rated and it's absolutely crazy. But anyway, let's get into my review of Sausage Party. Okay, so Sausage Party is an animated adventure comedy film that was directed by Tiernan and Conrad Vernon and stars a number of great actors and actresses in obviously very unusual roles that you can see from this cast list right here. So this movie primarily takes place in the fictional Shopwell's grocery store, where all the grocery store items dream of being taken to the great beyond, aka being taken home by a customer where they can live out the rest of their days in heaven basically. However, these grocery store items eventually find out that everything they've been told about the great beyond is a lie, and they try to figure out a way to stop the humans from eating them or using them in ways that would obviously bring them physical harm. You spend most of this movie with 5 characters primarily, and that's Frank the Sausage played by Seth Rogen, Brenda Bunsworth played by Kristen Wiig, Sammy Bagel Jr. played by Edward Norton, Vash played by David Krumholtz, and Barry the Sausage played by Michael Cera. There are a ton of other characters in this movie as well, but those are the big 5, so to speak, that primarily push the plot forward through their adventures and ultimately revelations about the great beyond and humans alike. But the rest of the movie is spent uncovering the dark and twisted truth about humans and the great beyond, and obviously trying to spread the word to the rest of the grocery store items and thus prevent more deaths. Okay, so this movie is pretty funny, but it's also pretty inconsistent. I say it's inconsistent because the first 2 acts of this movie have some decently funny moments, but I can't deny that I was pretty disappointed with it. I did laugh a decent amount and I was moderately entertained, but there weren't any huge laughs. It was mostly just little chuckles and me thinking, yeah, that was pretty clever. The story is also very underwhelming in the first 2 acts. Now I know this movie is supposed to be silly and ridiculous and the story is not really supposed to make sense, but my problem is more so with the execution of the story. The first 2 acts felt aimless and directionless and felt like the characters were just adventuring for no real reason and stumbling upon important tidbits of information out of sheer luck. I also felt like the characters that were adventuring together somehow managing to form this bond felt pretty unnatural, and it felt like the adventure didn't ultimately mean very much at all by the end of the film. I'll also say that the editing in the first 2 acts was pretty choppy and just jarring to say the least. There's continuity errors and weird uses of transitions and other things along those lines that just suck a little bit of the immersion element out of this movie for you. The way the story progresses in the first 2 acts was just very poorly executed in my opinion, and as a whole I was pretty underwhelmed with these parts of the story, from a comedy standpoint, a technical standpoint, and a narrative one. But everything changes when you hit Act 3, because it seems like this movie really hit its stride and found its identity in the last third of this movie. Everything is way funnier, the story and characters are better written and more interesting, the action becomes much more exciting and hilarious, and the overall quality of entertainment is much higher. And Act 3 absolutely redeemed this movie for me, because it is so funny and entertaining that I almost was able to forget the first 2 acts entirely and love this movie. This isn't to say that Acts 1 and 2 aren't funny and crazy, they definitely are, but Act 3 takes the humor and craziness to a whole nother level, where you're likely going to be very impressed and entertained because of just how creative the whole entertainment experience is. The action, the jokes, the stakes, everything get raised to a much more satisfying level in Act 3 of this movie, so if you're disappointed by the first 45 minutes or so when you see this movie, don't walk out of it. Just tough it out, because I promise you'll be rewarded greatly by the end of the film. Okay, so as for the overall humor in this movie, remember that this movie is rated R, so you're going to get that typical Seth Rogen brand of humor that contains jokes that are extremely raunchy, sexually explicit, mock stereotypes, and the like. So if this is not your preferred brand of humor, then this movie is definitely not going to be for you. It's got some scenes that are just crazy over the top violent and ridiculous. That's the only way I think I can explain it without ruining anything for you. But there's dick jokes, toilet humor, and so on that are most likely going to resonate from a comedy standpoint more so with younger audiences than older ones. Not to say that older audiences won't enjoy this movie, they definitely could, but I'd personally bet that this movie will likely be considered absolutely hilarious by the younger crowd and too raunchy by the older crowd. Also, I should mention that there's a ton of pop culture references with character names and items and so forth that you're going to be like, I see what you did there. One thing that I loved about this movie was the animation. The characters were beautifully crafted and looked about as lifelike as you can make a talking sausage with teeth and arms and shoes. All the action sequences, the characters, and their environments were beautifully crafted, and they allowed me to truly believe that these characters, while silly, were real and full of life. Everything about this movie from an animation standpoint is great. I thought the acting and dialogue was actually pretty solid overall too. Most of the time the characters are trying to crack jokes and be funny, but there are some cases where the actors relayed that feeling of fear or excitement through their voice as well. There are jokes that fall flat, but the dialogue as a whole felt like it was mostly well written, obviously more so in Act 3 than 1 and 2. Just a little quick note, if I had to pick my favorite character, it would probably be Edward Norton's character Sammy Bagel Jr., but there's plenty of well written and voice acted characters in this movie. One last thing I want to mention is that there's a scene in the closing parts of this film that is just absolutely insane, and it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen in any movie ever. It's not going to be for everyone though. My friend and I saw this movie last night, and we saw a couple actually walk out of the theater during this scene. It seemed like everyone else in the theater loved it, but just prepare yourself. Okay, so overall I'd say that I was satisfied with this movie. I think it had some great acting and a great cast, some awesome animation, a great Act 3 and climax, and some hilarious scenes, one great one at the end. I also felt Acts 1 and 2 were pretty underwhelming due to an aimless story. There was some super choppy editing in some moments, and some unfunny stretches in Acts 1 and 2 as well. I'm still gonna give this movie a 7.5 out of 10 and say that if you like Seth Rogen's brand of humor, that this movie is definitely worth a watch in theaters. If you're not a Seth Rogen fan, I'd recommend passing because this movie pretty much falls in line with the rest of his work. So did you guys see Sausage Party yet? What did you think of it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if not, let me know whether you'd be interested in watching this movie or not. And as always, if you like this video, click that like button and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for much more content like this. That's all for now. This is WillFoxification signing off. See you in the next review.